second assassination attempt on Donald Trump just occurred as political tensions in America have reached a new boiling point. The divide is so sharp that a number of people believe that the nation's very future is at stake if the other side wins.
Fundamentally, a second Trump term could mean the end of American democracy as we know it.
I don't think it's hyperbolic to say this genuinely could be the last Democratic election we ever had.
You're right.
If she ever got elected, she'd change it, and it will be the end of our country.
Extremes are becoming the new norm, and people are willing to do whatever it takes to, what they see as, protect the country. However, I believe that Christians have a unique opportunity right now to halt this crisis. But first, we need to understand what's fueling this madness, and only then can we determine how Christians should respond in a world spiraling into chaos.
Not my president! Not my president! The whole world is watching! The whole world is watching! Love Trump hate! Love Trump hate!
Alright, so at the time of filming, Trump just took to social media to say this. The rhetoric, lies, as exemplified by the false statements made by Comrade Kamala Harris during the debate, has taken politics in our country to a whole new level of hatred, abuse, and distrust. Because of this communist left rhetoric, the bullets are flying, and it will only get worse. And just a few days ago, during his debate with Kamala Harris, referring to the last attempt on his life, Trump said,
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
And all of this is wild because while Trump blames the left, on the other hand, you have some people at MSNBC that appear to be saying that Trump's rhetoric is the real issue.
Today's apparent assassination attempt comes amid increasingly fierce rhetoric on the campaign trail itself. Mr. Trump, his running mate J.D. Vance continue to make baseless claims about Haitian immigrants in Ohio. This weekend, there were new bomb threats.
Now, to be clear, without a doubt, the sharp rhetoric from the left has definitely played a role in the public sentiment towards Trump, framing him as a threat to democracy, which could lead to somebody wanting to take his life. And when people believe that the other side isn't just wrong, but a genuine threat to their safety, it makes it a lot easier for them to justify extreme actions like political violence. So Trump isn't entirely wrong that the rhetoric could have contributed to this, but to be fair, Trump isn't necessarily innocent of rhetoric either, as you can even see in the very statement that he gave. In reality, both sides are guilty of rhetoric that contributes to our hostile political environment, but here's why this rhetoric is different from times in the past, leading us to an almost uncontainable and dangerous problem. This right here is one of the many studies on social identity theory, which basically is a theory that helps to explain our innate desire to stay safe. It shows that we all have a psychological need to belong in a group and to defend it against perceived threats, making us feel safe. When politicians frame every issue as a battle between good and evil or us versus them, it strengthens the group identity. This makes people feel like they're not just voting for a candidate, but defending their very way of life. And of course this isn't new, because all politicians have used the us versus them rhetoric as a tool for rallying support. But in recent years, we've seen it evolve into something far more divisive. Creating this us versus them dynamic is effective, but that's only the first layer. In order to make the rhetoric even more impactful, politicians have upped the ante by using another ingredient that makes the escalation far more dramatic and necessary. And that ingredient is fear. And before we dive into the clever ways that they use fear, I want to make it clear that politicians aren't the only ones that know how to use the us versus them dynamic to their benefit. News outlets also show bias in how they cover their stories, making it hard for us to know if we're getting the full truth or not. And to avoid this issue, one tool that I like to use is Ground News, which is why I'm happy to have them sponsoring today's video. Ground News gathers articles from over 50,000 sources and shows you how they're covered across the political spectrum, letting you see the full picture. For example, when it comes to Trump describing the shooting, you can quickly see that 25 outlets have covered it so far, and you can also see which outlets have covered it. And if you go over here to the bias comparison tool, you can also see how the left, the center, and the right are all covering the same story. The right emphasizes Democratic rhetoric, while the left emphasizes Trump joking about sinking putts. Yeah, the bias couldn't be more clear. I also love the blind spot feed, which highlights stories that are disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. As you can see, only 7% of the left-wing outlets covered the fact that the FBI was tipped off in 2019 about the suspected Trump gunman owning firearms as a felon. This is a massive blind spot. So Ground News has become a valuable tool for me, especially as a Christian seeking truth and integrity in media. And if you want to try Ground News today, go to groundnews.com/whatdoyoumeme and get 40% off of access with the Vantage plan. All right, now back to the video. Alright, so the second ingredient is fear. Studies show that when people perceive an out-group as a serious threat, they're more likely to act strongly to protect their in-group. Fear is one of the most powerful motivators, and good politicians know this. By casting their opponents as dangerous, they ensure that their supporters are not just voting, they're defending. And of course, this makes it so politicians can assure their voters that unless people vote for them, then it will be the end of America as we know it. This creates a sense of loyalty that can be very powerful, but as a necessary consequence, it also leads to greater division.
She has destroyed our country with policy that's insane.
Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
We probably won't have a country left anymore. That's how bad it is.
This genuinely could be the last Democratic election we ever have.
You're right.
Politicians and pundits know that people are a lot more motivated to act when they feel that their group is under attack, and this leads to even bigger problems, like the one that was made evident during the last presidential debate that, for some reason, nobody seems to be talking about. What happened during their debate is something that we've been seeing more and more in the last few years. The debates have progressively been shifting away from talking about policies to talking about survival. Now, this is a very powerful rhetorical move, but once this happens, any chance of reasonable dialogue is just lost. This kind of rhetoric not only deepens divides, but it makes it nearly impossible for people to see the other side as anything but an enemy. I mean, think about how fear-driven political rhetoric has impacted your everyday life. Political debates used to be about issues, but now they have the power to divide friendships and even families. So we're seeing this division not just on social media, but also in our personal everyday lives as well. But fear only plants the seed of division. It's anger that brings it to the surface, fueling assassination attempts and the violent clashes that we see on the street today. You probably don't need these studies to know that anger is one of the most powerful emotions when it comes to motivation. Unlike fear that can paralyze, anger energizes people. It makes them feel like they need to do something, like to correct a perceived injustice or fight against a threat. In fact, anger at perceived injustice is what led to things like this.
This is getting serious. Oh my goodness.
And to things like this. When people strongly fear what the other side will do, or if they strongly feel that injustice has ensued, that's when we see people blowing up and wanting to take things into their own hands. And this is why anger sparked by political rhetoric plays into our most basic instincts for survival and justice. So when politicians lean into this, they create an environment where violence feels justified because it's framed as a means of defending what's right. And this is the environment that we're living in today, where things only seem to be escalating, and it seems that there's no way to halt this avalanche. Except for, well, maybe one thing that can really change everything. You see, if you look at this chart that's on your screen right now, that shows how many people identify as Christian today. And of course, a good number of that 68% will be nominal, but God has done incredible miracles with only a faithful few. And the reason why this is so important is because as Christians, we have a perspective that can change our society literally from the inside out. As we've seen, modern politics currently divides the world between us versus them, the good guys versus the bad guys. But in Christianity, at least when it comes to deserving salvation, there are no good guys, only bad guys. None of us are any more deserving of salvation than Trump, Harris, or the very worst person on the other side of the political aisle that you can think of. So if we truly believe the gospel, then that should change how we interact with and see others, stripping away the self-righteousness that modern politics enables. This means before we make it our mission to combat evil in this world, we first need to acknowledge the evil that we have within ourselves. But what's so interesting about this is that when we look at ourselves and see all of the evil and the wrong things that we've done, we somehow find a way to have patience and understanding. We tell ourselves all the reasons why what we did was understandable, and we see the nuance in our actions. But Jesus said to treat our enemies how we would want to be treated. And that means extending that same nuance and grace to others that we give ourselves. We can do this because of the grace that we receive from Christ, because Christ loved his enemies so much that he prayed for them when they were taking his very life. So if we want to make a difference in this world, then we can't act just like the world. The world reacts to the other side with hate and disdain, fear, and anger. But as Christians, since we not only know that there are no truly good guys, we also know that God didn't give us the spirit of fear, and also that we should be slow to become angry. So as we go out into this world, let's remember that our political engagement should always reflect Christ's love. We have the opportunity to bring healing where there's hurt, to speak peace where there's conflict, and to show grace where there's anger. The more that we implement these traits as we engage with politics, I'm convinced that if we could get the other side to change their minds and de-escalate, it will be because we're acting like Christ, not because we're using the world's tools and acting like the world. So lastly, make sure you take a second to pray for Trump and that God will continue to protect him according to his will, and that God will use us in these times to be salt and light in the world. All right, see you guys next time.